The sound of his black stallion's hooves echoed across the prairie as Alexander Morgan rode across his newly acquired lands. His lands. The word still sounded strange in his mind, even after 3 months since he had manipulated the property documents. The Oregon sun was beginning to set over the horizon, painting the sky with shades of red that resembled spilled blood. Morgan was known throughout the land as a man who got what he wanted, no matter the cost. At 42, his brown hair already showed grey strands at the temples, and deep lines marked his tanned face. His blue eyes, cold as steel, rarely betrayed any emotion. He stopped his horse on top of a hill, looking out over the valley that now belonged to him, or at least that's what the forged papers in his office said. The previous owners, the Nez Perce, had been driven out weeks ago, some by force, others by starvation. Morgan felt no remorse. For him, it was just business. "Mr. Morgan," the voice of his foreman Robert Wheeler interrupted his thoughts. "Trouble on the Northern Creek. Some Indians still resist leaving." Morgan adjusted his fedora and sighed heavily. "How many?" "A family. 3 adults and some children. They say it's sacred land." "Sacred land doesn't feed cattle, Wheeler. Send some men to—" Before he could finish his sentence, a figure emerged from the nearby vegetation. It was a young native girl, riding bareback on a spotted dick. Her long black hair danced in the wind, and her dark eyes glowed with a mixture of fury and determination. "Are you Morgan?" His voice was firm, his English surprisingly clear. "I am Morning Flower. You stole our lands." Morgan studied the young woman with interest. There was something different about her, a strength he rarely found in his victims. "Miss, I suggest you join your people. These lands have a new owner now." "These lands belong to the spirits of our ancestors," she replied, approaching her horse. "No paper can change that." Wheeler put his hand on his holster, but Morgan stopped him with a gesture. There was something about her presence that intrigued him, something that made him want to prolong the meeting. "Your people had a chance to sell legally," Morgan lied, keeping his voice controlled. "Liar!" Morning Flower exclaimed, her eyes sparkling. "You forged documents, poisoned our cattle, blocked our access to the creek. You think we don't know?" Morgan felt an uncomfortable twinge in his chest, something he hadn't experienced in a long time. Blame? No, impossible. Alexander Morgan felt no guilt. He had built his empire on the bones of weaker people, and it wouldn't be a pretty Indian woman who would change that. "Wheeler, escort the lady off my land," he ordered, turning his horse. "You'll see," Morning Flower called after his back. "The spirits do not forgive those who desecrate sacred lands. Your greed will be your undoing, Alexander Morgan." That night, at his newly built ranch, Morgan couldn't get her words out of his head. Sitting in his leather chair with a half-full glass of whiskey, he gazed through the window at the distant lights of the Nez Perce camp. "More problems, boss?" Frank Miller, his accountant and confidant, entered the office carrying a stack of papers. "Nothing a few armed men can't handle," Morgan replied, but his voice lacked the usual conviction. "Last month's profits exceeded expectations," Miller continued, spreading documents out on the table. "The expansion to the North Valley will triple our production capacity." "Do you believe in curses, Frank?" Morgan interrupted, surprising even himself with the question. Miller adjusted his glasses, confused. "Sir, leave it there." Morgan emptied his glass. "Prepare the documents for the expansion. I want to start construction of the new enclosures this week." But when Miller left, Morgan remained in his chair, his thoughts invariably returning to those dark eyes that seemed to see through his soul. For the first time in years, sleep was slow in coming, and when it finally came, it was filled with restless dreams of sacred lands and broken promises. The next morning, Morgan rode to the North Creek. He told himself it was just to supervise the situation, but something deeper was driving him. He found Morning Flower alone, kneeling at the water's edge, performing some kind of ritual. "Still here?" he asked, dismounting. She didn't turn around. "These waters flowed through these lands long before you were born, white man. They will continue to flow long after you are gone. I don't plan on leaving any time soon." "Everyone leaves in the end," she replied, finally standing up and turning to face him, some carrying more weight on their souls than others. Morgan felt that same restlessness as the day before. There was wisdom in that young woman, an understanding of the world that her piles of money never gave her. "How much do you want for the land?" he asked abruptly. "Name your price." Morning Flower smiled, but it was a sad smile. "You still don't understand. Some things can't be bought or sold, like the air you breathe, like the sun that rises every morning. This land is part of who we are." At that moment, something changed inside Alexander Morgan. A small crack appeared in the armor he had built over years of ruthless business dealings. For the first time, he saw the consequences of his actions not through the lens of profit, but through the eyes of someone who truly loved the land. But changes don't happen overnight, and the empire he had built wouldn't disappear with a simple conversation by the stream. Morgan got back on his horse, fighting feelings he didn't fully understand. "You have until the end of the week," he said, his voice hoarser than usual. "After that, my men will take action." As he rode back to the ranch, Morgan knew something fundamental had changed. The question was, would you be willing to accept this change, or would you fight against it until the end? The morning after the encounter at the creek, Alexander Morgan awoke with a restlessness he could not name. The sun had barely risen before he was in his office, examining the forged documents that granted him ownership of the Nez Perce lands. His hands shook slightly as he ran his fingers over the forged signatures, a detail that did not escape the attention of Frank Miller, who entered the room carrying the day's correspondence. "Are you okay?" Miller asked, adjusting his glasses. "Looks like he didn't sleep." "Bad dreams," Morgan replied dryly, putting the documents away in the drawer. "Any important news?" "Actually, yes. Governor Thompson has confirmed his presence at Saturday's benefit ball. It will be a great opportunity to cement our political connections." Morgan nodded absently. The ball would be the perfect occasion to ensure that no one questioned the legality of his recent acquisitions. But for the first time in his life, the idea of manipulating authorities did not bring him the usual satisfaction. "Have my horse ready," he ordered, standing up. "I need to personally check the situation at the creek." "But sir, we have a meeting with investors in 2 hours. Reschedule." Morgan's voice left no room for argument. Riding through the estate, his thoughts constantly returned to Morning Flower. There was something in her gaze that awakened long-buried memories. Memories of a time before greed and ambition consumed her soul. As he approached the stream, he heard voices singing in a language he did not understand. Hiding behind a group of trees, he observed a Nez Perce ritual. In the center of the circle, Morning Flower danced, her graceful movements telling an ancient story. The wind seemed to dance with her, carrying the sound of rattles and prayers. "It's rude to spy on sacred rituals," a deep voice surprised him. He was a Nez Perce elder, Silent Eagle, known for his wisdom. "I wasn't spying," Morgan lied, disconcerted. "Just inspecting my property." "Ah, yes. Your papers say it's your property." The elder smiled wryly. "But what does your heart say, Alexander Morgan?" The question hit him like a punch. "My heart does not interfere in business." "No?" Silent Eagle pointed at Morning Flower. "Then why have you come back here every day since you met her?" Morgan felt his face heat up. "I just came to make sure you're gone by the end of the week. She is like the river. continued the old man, ignoring her response. Strong, persistent, capable of changing even the hardest rocks over time. But beware, those who try to control the river often end up drowning. Before Morgan could respond, screams interrupted the ritual. 3 of his men, led by Wheeler, had arrived on horseback, brandishing weapons. "Leave these lands now," Wheeler shouted, shooting into the air. Chaos ensued. Women ran with children in their arms. Elders tried to protect sacred objects. Morgan came out of hiding, furious at the unauthorized intrusion. "Wheeler, who the hell gave you that order?" But before he could reach his men, he saw Morning Flower confronting Wheeler. She stood before him, unarmed, but her eyes burned with an intensity that made the foreman recoil. "You have no power here," she declared. "Your papers are lies, your weapons are cowardice. True strength comes from the earth, the waters, the spirits you cannot see or understand." Wheeler raised his gun, but Morgan was faster. "Put it down immediately, all of you out of here, now!" The men hesitated, surprised by their boss's reaction. Wheeler looked especially confused. "But sir, you said it yourself." "Outside!" When the men left, a heavy silence fell over the place. The Ney's purse began collecting their sacred belongings, casting suspicious glances at Morgan. "Why?" Morning Flower asked, approaching him. "Why defend ourselves now?" Morgan felt his heart quicken at her proximity. "I didn't defend anyone. I don't authorize unnecessary violence on my lands." "Your lands," she repeated bitterly. "We always come back to this, don't we?" "Look." Morgan ran a hand through his grey hair, frustrated. "I built everything I have from nothing. Every acre, every head of cattle was earned through hard work. And lies," she added, "and robberies, and destruction of what others have built before. Is that the legacy you want to leave, Alexander Morgan? Is that how you want to be remembered?" Her words hit him like well-aimed arrows. He remembered his father, a simple man who always preached honesty over profit. What would he say if he saw the man his son had become? "I have a proposal," Morgan said, surprising himself. "Give me a week to reconsider some things." Morning Flower studied him for a long time, as if trying to read his soul. "1 week doesn't erase decades of greed." "No," he agreed, "but maybe it's a start." When Morgan returned to the ranch that afternoon, he found Wheeler and Miller waiting in his office. They both looked worried. "Sir," Miller began, "the investors were not happy about the cancellation of the meeting, and there are rumors about your interaction with the natives." "What rumors?" "They say it's getting soft," Wheeler interjected. "That India bewitched you." Morgan poured himself a glass of whiskey, staring at the amber liquid in the light of the setting sun. "Have you two ever wondered if we're on the right side of history?" The silence that followed was deafening. Miller and Wheeler exchanged worried looks. "Sir," Miller cleared his throat, "I suggest you get some rest. Tomorrow we can—" "Leave," Morgan ordered softly. "Both. I need to think." Alone, Alexander Morgan faced the true reflection of his actions for the first time in decades. On the horizon, the sun dipped in shades of red, like the day he met Fleur de Manhin. But now, the colors no longer resembled spilled blood. They seemed more like a sign of transformation, of change. The question was, would he be ready for this change? And more importantly, would he be strong enough to face the consequences of a possible redemption? The days following the confrontation at the creek brought a noticeable change in Alexander Morgan. His employees noticed how he spent hours in his office, immersed in old documents, or rode alone to the edge of his land, always returning with a troubled expression. Governor Thompson's charity ball was approaching, and with it, the pressure for Morgan to keep up appearances. On Thursday morning, as he prepared for another day of work, a face from the past emerged in his memory. His late wife, Catherine. She had always managed to see through his ambition, warning him of the moral price of his achievements. Morgan shook the memory away with a sip of whiskey. "The invitations to the ball have arrived, sir," Miller announced, entering the office. "And there is something else. Troubling." Wheeler reported that he saw Morningflower talking to some Portland journalists. Morgan felt his stomach drop. What kind of journalists? Those who love a story about corruption and injustice against the natives. Miller nervously adjusted his glasses. "If they find out about the documents—" "They won't find out," Morgan cut in, but his voice betrayed uncertainty. "Get my attire ready for the ball. I need to make sure the governor remains cooperative." That afternoon, Morgan rode to the creek, this time not to confront but to understand. Found Morningflower teaching Nez Perce children about medicinal plants. Upon seeing him, the children ran to hide. "I came in peace," he said, dismounting. "We need to talk." "About the journalists?" Morningflower asked, her gaze sharp. "Or about how your conscience finally started to weigh in?" "Both." Morgan sat down on a nearby rock. "Why haven't you reported me yet?" "Because I believe that each person should have the chance to choose their own path," she replied, sitting across from him. "Even someone like you, Alexander Morgan." The sound of his name on her lips triggered a wave of contradictory emotions. "What do you want from me exactly?" "I want you to see, really see." She gestured to the surrounding valley. "This land is not just grass for your cattle. Every tree, every stone, every drop of water tells a story. Our ancestors are buried here. Our children are born knowing every trail, every sacred corner." Morgan observed the valley with different eyes. In addition to the fences he had built and the landmarks on his property, he began to notice details that he had previously ignored. Old markings on the trees, small half-hidden stone altars, the natural path that the stream traced as if telling a story. "The governor's ball is in 2 days," he said finally. "Every important man in the territory will be there, including those who facilitated my acquisition of these lands. And maybe it's time for some truths to come out." Morningflower's eyes sparkled with something new, hope, perhaps. "Words are easy, Alexander. Actions cost more." "Losing everything I've built would be no small cost," he argued, more to himself than to her. "And what did you actually build?" she challenged. "Fences? Lies? An empire based on false papers and troubled spirits?" At that moment, a group of knights approached. It was an army patrol, led by Captain Harrison, known for his aggressive stance against the natives. "Morgan," called Harrison, approaching. "Still having trouble with these savages? I can fix it permanently for you." Morgan felt Morningflower tense up beside him. He saw the captain's hand rest casually on his weapon, contempt in his eyes, as he looked at the young Nez Perce. It was like seeing his own reflection from weeks ago, and the sight sickened him. "No problems here, Captain," Morgan replied, his voice firm. "We're just negotiating a peaceful settlement." Harrison laughed. "Trading? With Indians? You're getting soft, Morgan. Be careful, or you'll lose your place among men of respect." "Maybe it's time to redefine what respect means," Morgan responded, surprising everyone, including himself. After the soldiers left, a heavy silence fell between Morgan and Morningflower. She studied him with an intensity that seemed to reach his soul. "Why did you defend me?" he finally asked. Morgan hesitated, searching for the right words. "Because for the first time in a long time, I felt ashamed of the man I had become." Back at the ranch, Morgan found Wheeler waiting with urgent news. Several important investors were threatening to withdraw their support, worried about rumors about his sympathy for the Indians. Sitting in his office, Morgan looked at Catherine's portrait on the wall. "What would you do, my love?" he murmured to the silent image. The answer came not from the painting, but from his own heart. He took paper and pen and began to write. A complete confession about the forged documents, the bribes, the manipulations. When he finished, he sealed the envelope addressed to the editor of the Portland newspaper. "Sir?" Miller entered, carrying more mail. "Everything is fine?" Morgan looked out the window, where the sun was setting over the land he had stolen. "No, Frank. Nothing is okay. But maybe for the first time in a long time, I'm on the right path." The price of redemption would be high, he knew. The governor's ball was in 48 hours. Until then, he would need to decide if he was really prepared to lose everything he built for something he couldn't fully explain. A mix of love, guilt, and the desire to do the right thing, even if belatedly. Governor Thompson's salon glowed with the light of hundreds of candles, reflecting off the jewelry of Oregon's high society ladies. Alexander Morgan adjusted his black silk vest as he watched the territory's elite dance and socialize, unaware of the dark decisions weighing on his mind. The envelope with his confession rested in the inside pocket of his jacket, weighing like lead against his chest. "Morgan, my old friend," Governor Thompson approached, his face flushed with champagne. "I'm glad you came. We need to discuss that expansion north. I heard you had some setbacks with the natives." "Indeed, Governor," Morgan began, but was interrupted by a commotion at the hall's entrance. All eyes turned to the front door, where Morning Flower stood, wearing traditional Nez Perce attire, richly decorated with beads and feathers. Beside him, Silent Eagle emanated a dignity that made several guests step back. "This is an outrage!" exclaimed the governor's wife, fanning herself furiously. "Who allowed these savages to enter?" "I allowed it," Morgan declared, his voice cutting through the bubbling buzz. The entire hall fell silent, watching in astonishment as he crossed the room to greet the unexpected visitors. Fleur de Manhun stared at him with a mixture of defiance and expectation. "We have come to hear your decision, Alexander Morgan, in front of all these important people you value so much." Wheeler and Miller, who were standing near the buffet, exchanged worried glances. Some of the investors began whispering among themselves, and Morgan could feel his empire beginning to crumble before he even uttered a word. "Ladies and gentlemen," Morgan raised his voice, feeling the weight of each gaze upon him, "I have a confession to make." "Morgan," Governor Thompson warned in a low voice, approaching, "think carefully about what you're going to say." But Alexander Morgan had already thought. During sleepless nights, during long horse rides, during every moment when Morning Flower's gaze haunted his conscience. He took the envelope out of his pocket and opened it. "For years, I built my fortune through questionable means, forged documents, bribes, intimidation. The lands I claim as my own were stolen from the Nez Perce people through fraud and violence." A shocked murmur ran through the hall. Morgan saw Wheeler start to draw his gun, but a stern look from Silent Eagle stopped him. "The papers in this envelope contain detailed evidence of every illegal transaction, every corrupt official I bribed, every family I unjustly displaced, including," he looked directly at Thompson, "details about certain politicians who facilitated these operations." The governor visibly paled. "This is crazy, Morgan. You're going to destroy everything we've built." "No, Thompson, I'll fix what we destroyed." Morgan walked over to Morning Flower, handing her the envelope. "This is just the beginning. I intend to return the sacred lands to the Nez Perce people and use my remaining influence to ensure their rights are respected going forward." The silence that followed was deafening. Morning Flower took the envelope with steady hands, her eyes never leaving Morgan's. For a moment, he saw something beyond the usual defiance, a gleam of wonder, perhaps even of something deeper. "Do you understand that this means your social ruin?" she asked softly. Some things are more important than money and status, Morgan replied, surprising himself with the peace he felt as he uttered those words. You taught me that. Arrest him, shouted Thompson, his face now purple with rage. He admitted his crimes. Two deputies advanced, but Silent Eagle raised his hand in a gesture of ancestral power. If you arrest this man, all the documents in this envelope will be published tomorrow. How many of you will fall with him? The threat hung in the air like smoke. Thompson and his allies retreated, aware of the precipice they found themselves on. This isn't over, Morgan, hissed the governor, before hastily leaving the room, followed by most of the guests. Miller approached hesitantly. Sir, what about the ranch? The business? We will only keep what was legally acquired, Morgan replied. The rest will be returned to their rightful owners. When the room emptied, leaving only a few curious people on the edges, Morgan turned to Morning Flower. I don't know if this makes up for all the harm I've done, but... She stopped him with a gentle touch to his face. It's a start. A man doesn't change overnight, but you've taken the first step on the right path. And now? Now, she smiled, you learn our history, our customs, learn to respect the land as it deserves to be respected. Morgan felt his heart quicken at her proximity. It's going to be a long journey. The best stories usually are, Silent Eagle commented with an enigmatic smile. As they left the room together, Morgan knew her life would never be the same. He had lost an empire of lies, but maybe, just maybe, he had gained something much more valuable in return. Outside, the starry Oregon sky silently witnessed the dawn of a new era, where old wounds began to heal and new bonds were forged under the light of the waxing moon. News of Alexander Morgan's public confession at the governor's ball spread through Oregon like dry prairie fire. The next morning, his ranch was buzzing with the presence of journalists, nervous creditors, and curious people who gathered at the gates, all eager for more details of the scandal that shook the foundations of local power. Morgan watched the movement from the porch of his house, the deep, dark circles under his eyes betraying a sleepless night. Frank Miller approached, carrying a stack of urgent telegrams and documents. The banks are demanding immediate repayment of loans, Miller reported, his voice tense, and 3 of our biggest cattle buyers cancelled their contracts. To be expected, Morgan replied, surprisingly calm. Prepare the Nez Perce land transfer documents. I want everything ready by the end of the week. Sir, Miller hesitated, if I may, why did you do that yesterday? Years of work, your entire empire. Morgan turned to face his accountant. Do you have children, Frank? Yes, 2 boys. And what kind of man do you want them to see when they look at your father? Miller adjusted his glasses thoughtfully. I understand, sir. But still. A group of riders approached the ranch, interrupting the conversation. Ahead, Morning Flower rode her spotted Dick, accompanied by Silent Eagle and other Nez Perce elders. Wheeler and a few cowboys immediately reached for their holsters. Put your weapons down, Morgan ordered. They are guests now. Walking down the porch steps, Morgan felt the weight of his employees' stares. Some showed disapproval, others curiosity, and few, like Miller, seemed to begin to understand. We have come to discuss the terms of the transition, Silent Eagle announced after dismounting. And also, the elder exchanged a meaningful look with Morning Flower, offer a proposal. Morgan led the group to his office, where maps of the properties covered a large oak desk. Wheeler insisted on remaining, his distrust still evident. These are the original boundaries of Nez Perce lands, Morgan indicated on the map. I intend to return everything I took illegally. And what's left for you? Morning Flower asked, her eyes studying his face. The main ranch and the land to the south, which were purchased legally. Morgan traced the area with his finger. Enough for a fresh start if the banks don't take it all first. Silent Eagle cleared his throat. And this is where our proposal comes in. The Nez Perce people do not seek revenge, Alexander Morgan. We seek harmony, balance. We propose a partnership. Partnership? Wheeler couldn't contain his surprise. Yes, the elder continued. Your livestock skills are undeniable. Our knowledge of the land, rangelands, and natural cycles could benefit everyone. A cooperative between your ranch and our reservation. Morgan sat heavily in his chair, stunned by the proposal. After everything I've done, the true test of a man is not to never make mistakes, Morning Flower interjected, approaching. It's how he chooses to correct them. Their eyes met, and Morgan felt that familiar rush of emotions that his presence always provoked. I would need to learn a lot about their customs, their traditions. Are you willing? She challenged. I am. Wheeler slammed the table hard. This is crazy. First he confesses to crimes at the governor's ball. Now he wants to associate with... Watch your next words, Wheeler, Morgan warned, his voice sharp. You can choose to leave if you don't agree with the changes. The foreman left, slamming the door, and Morgan knew he would lose other employees in the coming days. But looking at Morning Flower, at the strength and wisdom in her eyes, he felt that every loss would be worth it. The following hours were dedicated to planning the transition. Miller, initially skeptical, soon became excited about the cooperative's financial possibilities. Silent Eagle shared ancestral knowledge about sustainable pasture management, while Morning Flower translated technical terms between English and Nez Perce. At dusk, when the last details were being worked out, Morgan asked for a moment alone with Fleur de Manha. They walked to the stream that had so much meaning for both of them. Why did you really propose this partnership? He asked. They could just take back their lands and see me ruined. Morning Flower picked a wildflower before answering. Because I saw something in you that prom night, something my people value more than gold. Courage to change. What about us? Morgan dared to ask. This feeling between us? It's like this stream, she smiled, tossing the flower into the water. It can't be forced or controlled. It needs to find its own way naturally. A scream interrupted the moment. Wheeler returned with a group of armed men, including Captain Harrison. There he is, Wheeler pointed out, the traitor who is handing over our lands to the savages. Morgan, Harrison stepped forward, his hand on his holster. You have caused a lot of trouble. Governor Thompson suggests that you reconsider your recent decisions or face serious consequences. Morning Flower took a step forward, but Morgan stopped her gently. My answer is no, Captain. They can threaten me. They can try to ruin me, but I will not back down. Then we'll have to do this the hard way. Harrison drew his gun, but before he could aim, a group of Nez Perce warriors emerged from the vegetation, bows drawn. I suggest you reconsider. Silent Eagle's voice sounded calm, but authoritative. Blood spilled here will only bring more problems for everyone. Harrison assessed the situation, realizing he was at a disadvantage. This isn't over, Morgan. You've made powerful enemies. Maybe, Morgan replied, but it also made even more powerful allies. When the men left, Morgan turned to Morning Flower. That's going to happen a lot more. Yes, she agreed. Real change is never easy. Are you ready? Morgan looked at the stream, at the flower she had thrown being carried away by the current. Like water, I couldn't turn back now. His only path was forward, towards an uncertain but promising future. With you by my side, he replied. I'm prepared for anything. Dawn found Alexander Morgan reviewing old contracts in his office, his face marked by the tiredness of the last few nights without sleep. News of his confession at the ball and subsequent partnership with the Nez Perce had spread like wildfire across the territory, provoking reactions ranging from admiration to outright contempt. 3 more cowboys asked for their bills this morning, Miller reported, entering the office with his usual pile of documents. And Merchants Bank in Portland sent another telegram. They want an urgent meeting about our mortgages. Morgan nodded, not looking up from the papers in front of him. How many men do we have left? Less than half the original strength. Wheeler took several with him when he left. The sound of approaching hooves interrupted the conversation. Through the window, Morgan saw a group of young Nez Perce warriors arriving, led by Morning Flower. His heart involuntarily accelerated when he saw her, as it always did in the last few days. The first apprentices have arrived, she announced as she entered, her eyes shining with determination. They are ready to learn about raising cattle, as we agreed. And are our cowboys ready to learn from them? Morgan asked, standing up. They will have to be, Morning Flower replied with a half-smile. Silent Eagle says shared knowledge is like a seed. It needs fertile soil on both sides to grow. Miller cleared his throat nervously. Sir, with all due respect, we have already lost many experienced men. If we start changing traditional methods too much. Traditional methods have gotten us here, Frank, Morgan interrupted. Maybe it's time for something new. Outside, Morgan watched as the young Nez Perce mixed hesitantly with the remaining cowboys. The tension was palpable. Decades of distrust and prejudice would not dissolve overnight. We'll start with the basics, he announced to the group. How to find the best pastures, how to move the herd without depleting the land. The Nez Perce know this territory better than anyone. Let's learn from them. And they will learn from us about cattle management, fencing, tools, added Flor Damanhur. 2 knowledge becoming 1. One of the older cowboys, Pete Martinez, stepped forward. I worked with your father, Mr. Morgan. He always said a man needs to know when to change to survive. I'm in. Those words seemed to break some of the tension. Little by little, cowboys and warriors began to exchange less suspicious glances, some even showing shy smiles. As the group organized themselves for the day's work, Morgan pulled Morning Flower aside. We need to talk about something serious. Thompson and his allies won't give up easily. I've already received 3 veiled threats this week. My people are worried too, she admitted. Some elders fear this partnership will make us easy targets. Others? Morning Flower hesitated, a soft blush staining her cheeks. Others question my reasons for trusting you so much. They say I let personal feelings cloud my judgment. Morgan felt his heart speed up again. And left? Maybe, she replied, her eyes meeting his with intensity. But I also saw something in you that others don't. A chance to create a bridge between our worlds. A scream from the corrals interrupted the intimate moment. One of the young Nez Perce had been thrown by a particularly skittish horse, eliciting laughter from some of the cowboys. Look, scoffed one of them. Maybe they're not as good knights as they think. Before the situation could get worse, the young warrior stood up, dusted himself off, and to everyone's surprise, laughed too. Smart horse, he said in broken English. Teach humility. Good teacher. His reaction diffused the tension, turning the mischievous laughter into something more friendly. Soon, experienced cowboys were offering tips on how to tame that specific horse, while the Nez Perce were sharing their own riding techniques. It's sore? Morning Flower smiled at Morgan. Change happens in small moments. The afternoon brought more challenges. An urgent telegram reported that Governor Thompson had called a special meeting of the Territorial Council to discuss irregularities in land grants. It was a clear threat. They're going to try to invalidate our partnership legally, Morgan explained to Silent Eagle, who had arrived for an emergency meeting. They might even try to use my own confession against us." The old man smoked his pipe thoughtfully before answering. "When two rivers meet, there is always turbulence. But then the waters calm down and flow together stronger." "We don't have that much time," Miller interjected. "Banks can foreclose on mortgages at any time. Without working capital—" "My people have resources," Morningflower suggested. "Not money as you know it, but furs, crafts, knowledge of ancient trade routes." "And I have contacts in San Francisco," Morgan added, an idea beginning to form. "Investors who don't owe Thompson any favors. If we can show that our partnership is commercially viable—" "A delegation," Silent Eagle nodded. "Young warriors and cowboys traveling together to establish new trade routes, showing that cooperation is more profitable than conflict." Morgan looked out the window, where the men were still working together, learning from each other. "It won't be easy. Thompson and his allies will do everything they can to stop us." "Nothing worth having is easy," Morningflower touched his arm gently. "But together, we are stronger than them." That night, after everyone had retired, Morgan remained on his porch, watching the stars. The weight of the decisions he had made, the changes he had initiated, sometimes seemed overwhelming. "But then I thought about Fleur de Manhun, about its people, about the possibility of creating something truly new and fair, and I found the strength to continue." "Can't sleep?" Her voice surprised him. Morningflower emerged from the shadows, ethereal in the moonlight. "Lots of thoughts," he admitted. "Regrets?" "No," Morgan replied with surprising certainty. "For the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm on the right path, even if it's the hardest one." She approached, her scent of wild herbs enveloping him. "Tomorrow we begin our true journey. Are you ready?" Morgan looked at her, at the strength and beauty she radiated, and knew her answer. "With you by my side, I'm ready for anything." The night enveloped them in its starry blanket. While on the ranch, two different cultures began their delicate dance of rapprochement, learning and change. Dawn brought with it dark clouds that gathered on the horizon, foreshadowing a storm, both literal and metaphorical. Alexander Morgan watched the sky from the porch of his ranch, feeling the electricity in the air that preceded great changes. Beside him, Miller was organizing the final details for the trip to San Francisco. "The first riders leave today," the accountant reported, nervously adjusting his glasses. "Half cowboys, half Nez Perce, as agreed. But I received troubling news from Portland." "Thompson?" Morgan asked, even though he already knew the answer. "Yes. He convinced the Territorial Council to freeze his bank accounts until the land investigation is complete, and there are rumors that Wheeler is recruiting men to—" A group of riders approached the ranch, interrupting the conversation. Ahead, Morningflower rode with the natural grace of her people, her long black hair dancing in the morning wind. At his side, Pete Martinez led the cowboys who remained loyal to Morgan. "The young people are ready," she announced, dismounting gracefully. "Silent Eagle performed the sunrise blessing ceremony. Now, we just need your word." Morgan walked down the porch steps, aware of the eyes following him. In recent days, his transformation from ruthless cattle baron to defender of a new form of coexistence between whites and natives had sent shockwaves throughout the territory. Some called him crazy, others a visionary. Few understood that true change came through love, a feeling that grew with each look exchanged with Fleur de Manhun. "Before you leave," Morgan addressed the assembled group, "I need you to understand something. This trip is not just about trade. It is about showing that there is a different path, one where cooperation trumps conflict. Each of you bears that responsibility." "And each of us understands the risk," added Martinez, his sun-bleached face showing determination. "Wheeler and his men might try to intercept us." So we'll split into two groups, Morningflower explained, unfolding a map over the nearest barrel. The first will follow the traditional route, serving as a distraction. The second will use old Nez Perce trails through the mountains. Distant thunder rumbled, making the restless horses neigh. Morgan took the moment to study the faces around him. Young Nez Perce warriors mixed with seasoned cowboys, all united by a purpose greater than their differences. "Miller," called Morgan, "distribute the money we managed to gather. It's not much, but it should be enough to—" "Night's approaching!" The watchman's shout interrupted his instructions. "Over 20 armed men." Morgan exchanged a quick glance with Morningflower. "Wheeler?" "And Harrison," she confirmed, after peering briefly through binoculars. They seemed determined this time. "Martinez, get the groups out of here now. Use the routes we have planned." Morgan began handing out orders quickly. "Miller, burn the compromising documents. Everyone else prepare to—" "No," Morningflower interrupted him, holding his arm. "If we run away now, they will never stop chasing us. We must face them." "That's a lot of men with guns," Morgan argued, even though he knew she was right. "And we have something stronger than guns," she smiled, pointing to the horizon. Rising from the hills like morning spirits, dozens of Nez Perce warriors emerged, led by Silent Eagle. Wheeler and his men stopped a safe distance from the ranch, clearly surprised by the reception they found. Captain Harrison took a few steps forward, his voice cutting through the tense morning air. "Morgan, last chance to do this by law. Hand over the land deeds and abandon this madness of partnering with the savages." "The only madness here," Morgan responded loudly, "is continuing a cycle of violence and injustice that has gone on too long." "Then let it be the hard way." Harrison drew his gun, but before he could aim, a Nez Perce arrow hit it, knocking it out of his hand. The ensuing chaos was quelled by the thundering voice of Silent Eagle, who spoke in perfect English. "Your weapons are no match for our resolve. Look around. You are surrounded not just by warriors, but by an idea whose time has come." Wheeler, realizing the unfavorable situation, tried to regroup his men, but several were already retreating, intimidated by the massive presence of the Nez Perce. "This isn't over, Morgan," Harrison shouted as he backed away. "The governor will know about this insurrection." "Tell him," Morningflower replied authoritatively, "that the times of stealing land and lives are over. A new era has begun in Oregon." When the invaders finally departed, leaving only dust and empty threats behind, Morgan met with Silent Eagle and Morningflower to replan their next steps. "We need the caravans to get to San Francisco," Morgan insisted. "It's our only chance to establish trade routes independent of Thompson's control." "And they will arrive," Silent Eagle assured. "My best warriors will escort you through the mountains. Neither Wheeler nor Harrison know those paths." Morningflower, who had remained thoughtful, finally spoke. "But we need more. We need to show everyone that our partnership is not just about trade. It's about building bridges between worlds." "As?" Morgan asked, although something in his heart already knew the answer. "Marry me," she said simply, her eyes meeting his with intensity. "Not just for love, although that exists, but as a symbol that true union is possible." The silence that followed was broken only by the distant sound of thunder. Morgan felt the weight of that proposal, not just in his heart, but in everything it would represent for the future they were trying to build. "Would the elders approve?" asked the Silent Eagle. The old leader smiled. "They've already approved it. In fact, we were wondering how long it would take them to come to that conclusion on their own." In the distance, the first groups of knights headed toward San Francisco, carrying with them the hopes of a new beginning. Above, the storm was finally beginning to break, but neither Morgan nor Morningflower seemed to mind the rain drenching them. "Yes," Morgan replied, taking her hands in his. "Yes, I will marry you." And there, Under the rain that washed away the old and nourished the new, they sealed not only their love, but a commitment to a future where different peoples could live and prosper together. News of the impending marriage between Alexander Morgan and Morning Flower spread across the land with the speed of a prairie fire. For some, it was a symbol of hope. For others, the final confirmation of the madness that had gripped the once ruthless cattle baron. In the small Oregon City church, Reverend Jameson hesitated at the unusual request. "A marriage between you and a native?" The religious man stammered, uncomfortable. "I don't know if—" "The ceremony will be twofold," Morgan explained patiently. "Christian and Nez Perce. We want it to symbolize the union, not just between two people, but between two peoples." "But territorial laws—" "Laws can change," interrupted Morning Flower, who had remained silent until then. "How hearts can change." The Reverend studied the couple in front of him, noticing something that went beyond the obvious cultural differences, a shared determination, a strength that emanated from both of them. Finally, he nodded slowly. "May God forgive me if I'm wrong, but I'll do it." Back at the ranch, preparations for both ceremonies were taking place amid an atmosphere of watchful tension. Nez Perce warriors and loyal cowboys took turns patrolling, aware that Wheeler and his men might try something at any moment. "The first caravans have already arrived in Sacramento," Miller reported during a strategy meeting. "Contacts in San Francisco are impressed with the quality of the cattle and are especially interested in alternative trade routes." "And Thompson?" Morgan asked, studying the map on his desk. "Furious. The Territorial Council is divided. Some members are beginning to see the economic advantages of our partnership. Others fear this is just the beginning," added Silent Eagle, who had just entered the office. "They fear that other tribes will demand their rights, that more white men will follow their example, Morgan." "And they are right to fear," Morning Flower declared. "True change always brings fear to those who profit from injustice." A sudden movement in the courtyard caught his attention. Pete Martinez was galloping back, his horse covered in sweat. "Wheeler!" he shouted, still mounted. "He's gathering men in Portland. I hear he's planning something for his wedding day." Morgan felt Morning Flower tense up beside him. "How many men?" "At least 30. And it's not just gunmen. There are some army officers among them." "Harrison," Morgan murmured, "you must be convincing your superiors that we are a threat to the territorial order." Night fell over the ranch, bringing with it a deceptive stillness. On the porch, Morgan found Morning Flower gazing at the stars, her profile silhouetted against the night sky. "We can postpone," he suggested softly. "Wait until things calm down." "No," she turned to face him. "If we delay now, we will be showing weakness. Besides—" A soft smile lit up his face. "I've already waited too long to be your wife." Morgan pulled her into his arms, marveling at how that woman could combine so much strength with such sweetness. "Are you sure your people will accept me, after everything I've done?" "My people understand that true strength lies in the ability to change, to recognize mistakes and work to correct them." She touched his face gently. "You are no longer the man who stole our land, Alexander. You are the man who chose a different path, even though you knew it would be the most difficult." The days leading up to the wedding were filled with intense preparations, not only for the ceremonies, but also for possible confrontations. Morgan reorganized his defenses, deploying Nez Perce warriors and cowboys at strategic points. Miller gained support from some independent Portland merchants who saw the new partnership as an opportunity to break Thompson's monopoly. On the eve of the big day, a surprise arrived at the ranch. Letters of support from other tribes in the region, along with traders from San Francisco who had traded with the first caravans. The movement that Morgan and Fleur d'Armanha started began to gain strength of its own, inspiring others to question old prejudices and seek new paths. "See," Silent Eagle commented, showing Morgan the letters. "Like the wind that scatters seeds across the prairie, your actions planted hope in faraway places." "Hope is good," Morgan replied, checking his weapons once again, "but tomorrow we may need more than that." The elder smiled mysteriously. "We'll have more to look forward to tomorrow, son. Much more." That night, as the new moon turned the sky exceptionally dark, Morgan lay awake in his office, mentally going over all the preparations. A soft knock on the door surprised him. Between. It was Catherine, the old cook who had served her family for decades. She carried something wrapped in an old cloth. "This belonged to your mother," she said, revealing a gold watch. "She asked me to give it to you when she found someone she really loved. It took a while, but I think the time has finally come." Morgan took the watch with shaking hands, remembering how her mother always said that true love had the power to transform people. At the time, he considered it romantic nonsense. Now, "Thank you, Catherine." His voice was hoarse with emotion. "For keeping this, for believing that one day You always had a good heart," the old lady smiled. "I just needed someone special to remind him of that." When she left, Morgan opened the clock, finding an ancient inscription inside. "Love is stronger than pride." Smiling, he thought of how his mother would approve of Morning Flower, her strength, her wisdom, her ability to see beyond appearances. The dawn of their wedding day approached, bringing with it promises of change and threats of conflict. But for the first time in his life, Alexander Morgan was at peace with his choices, ready to face whatever storm fate brought. The wedding day dawned with a fine fog covering the valley, as if nature itself was trying to protect the ceremony that would unite two worlds. At Morgan Ranch, activity began before sunrise, Nez Perce warriors and cowboys strategically positioning themselves, while women from both cultures prepared sacred rituals. Flower of the Morning was in a tent specially erected for the traditional preparations of his tribe. Elders dressed her in ceremonial clothing, richly decorated with beads and eagle feathers, while they sang ancient songs of blessing and protection. "The spirits are restless today," murmured one of the elders, burning sacred herbs. "They feel like big changes are coming." "Changes have already come," replied Morning Flower, as her long braids were decorated with white feathers. "We're just making them visible to everyone." In the main house, Morgan adjusted his best black suit, his hands shaking slightly as he attached his mother's watch to his vest. Miller hurried in, his face a mask of concern. 3 different groups of riders were seen approaching from different directions, the accountant reported. "Wheeler is with one of them. Harrison leads another." "And the third?" Morgan asked, checking his gun before holstering it. "Unknown, but they seem well armed." Morgan nodded, already expecting something like this. "The defensive positions are—" A commotion outside interrupted his sentence. Rushing to the balcony, he saw a scene that made his heart skip a beat. Dozens of horsemen emerging from the morning fog. But they weren't Wheeler's or Harrison's men. They were representatives of other indigenous tribes in the region, arriving to witness the historic union. "The spirits have answered our calls," declared Silent Eagle, joining Morgan on the porch. Umatilla, Yakima, and even some Crow chiefs came to show their support. Soon after, more horsemen appeared, this time independent ranchers and traders from various parts of the territory, all who had benefited from the new trade routes established by the partnership between Morgan and the Nez Perce. "Looks like we're not as alone as Thompson thought," Morgan commented, a smile forming on his lips. The ceremony was planned to take place outdoors, where the traditions of both cultures could meet under the open sky. Reverend Jameson arrived escorted by loyal cowboys, still appearing nervous about the unconventional nature of the event. When Morning Flower emerged from her tent, a collective gasp went through the gathered crowd. She radiated a wild, dignified beauty, blending traditional Nez Perce elements with small Western touches. A silver necklace that had belonged to Morgan's mother, a delicate lace shawl draped over her tribal robes. The moment of peace was broken by the distant sound of approaching hooves. Martinez galloped to the center of the ceremonial circle. "Wheeler and his men are less than a mile away. Harrison is coming from the north side with an entire company." But before the panic set in, something extraordinary happened. The tribal chiefs present stood as one man, their warriors forming a protective circle around the ceremony site. Ranchers and independent traders drew their weapons, positioning themselves alongside the natives. "No man will hinder this union," declared Chief Umatilla in a thunderous voice. "Today is not just about two hearts coming together, it's about a new path being forged." Morgan walked over to Morning Flower, who remained serene despite the tension in the air. "We can still postpone," he whispered. "No," she smiled, touching his face gently. "This is exactly the right time. Let them see our strength." The sound of gunfire echoed in the distance, but instead of panic, it provoked a stunning response. More than 100 bows were drawn simultaneously, while rifles were cocked in a perfect defensive circle. Wheeler and his men emerged first, stopping abruptly upon seeing the assembled force. Harrison arrived moments later, his soldiers clearly surprised by the number of defenders. "This is an insurrection!" shouted Harrison, his face red with fury. "No," Morgan replied, his voice carrying an authority that surprised everyone. "This is the future, a future where different peoples can live and prosper together without violence or oppression." "Morgan's right." A new voice joined the discussion. It was James Foster, one of the most respected federal judges in the territory, who had just arrived with the third group of knights. "And I have here arrest warrants for Wheeler, Harrison, and several others, for multiple violations of federal laws and treaties with Indian nations." The shock was visible on the attackers' faces. Some of Wheeler's men immediately lowered their weapons, others began to slowly retreat. "You can't do this!" Wheeler protested, but his voice already sounded defeated. "We already did," Foster replied calmly. "The winds of change are blowing, gentlemen. I suggest you do not fight them." As the federal marshals accompanying Foster began to make the arrests, Morgan and Morning Flower exchanged a deep look. Without words, they knew that that moment marked more than their personal union. It was the birth of a new era. The ceremony that followed was unique in its beauty and meaning. Reverend Jameson led Christian vows, while Nez Perce elders performed sacred rituals of their tradition. Smoke from purifying herbs mingled with the church's incense, while prayers in English and the Nez Perce language intertwined in the morning air. "Two rivers now become one," declared Silent Eagle, wrapping the couple's joined hands with a decorated leather band. "May its waters flow together forever, nurturing a new land of hope." "By the power vested in me," the Reverend added, his voice now firm and confident, "and with the blessings of two peoples, I pronounce you husband and wife." When Morgan and Morning Flower kissed, the sun finally broke through the fog, bathing the congregation in golden light. It was a new dawn, not just for them, but for the entire Oregon Territory. The first year after Alexander Morgan and Morning Flower's wedding brought profound changes not only to the couple, but to the entire Oregon Territory. The Morgan Ranch, once a symbol of greed and oppression, has become a model of cooperation between cultures. Trade caravans, combining the experience of the cowboys with the ancestral knowledge of the Nez Perce, established prosperous new routes that benefited everyone. One spring morning, Morgan watched from the porch as young Nez Perce warriors trained new cowboys in ancient tracking techniques. Morning Flower joined him, her belly already beginning to show signs of the new life she carried. "Thoughtful today?" she asked, intertwining her fingers with his. "Remembering how it all started," Morgan replied, still marveling at how his life had changed. "If someone told me a year ago that I would be here." "The spirits have always known their true path," she smiled. "They just needed you to discover it too." The peace of the morning was interrupted by the arrival of Miller, carrying urgent telegrams from Portland. "Important news, sir. Wheeler and Harrison's trial is over. They have been found guilty on all charges." Morgan nodded gravely. After months of testimony and evidence, justice had finally reached those who had fought so hard to maintain the old system of oppression. Thompson had fled to Canada when investigations began to reveal the extent of his corruption. "And there's more," Miller continued, adjusting his glasses with a rare smile. "The interim governor has officially approved our commercial cooperative proposal. The Morgan Nez Perce model will be used as an example for future partnerships with other tribes." Morning Flower shook Morgan's hand, her eyes shining with pride. "See? The change we started is spreading like ripples on a lake." "Like that first day at the creek," Morgan murmured, remembering the moment she'd confronted him about the stolen land. "You told me that some things couldn't be bought or sold." "And you learned your lesson well," she smiled, touching his face gently. The afternoon brought more visitors to the ranch, representatives from other tribes and ranchers interested in establishing similar partnerships. Silent Eagle, now a constant and respected presence, conducted negotiations with a wisdom that blended tradition and pragmatism. "Each agreement like this is a seed planted," the elder commented over dinner. "Some will grow strong, others may wither, but all change the land in which they are planted." Morgan surveyed the crowded table, natives and whites sharing meal and stories, their children playing together on the patio. Catherine, the old cook, had learned traditional Nez Perce recipes, while the women of the tribe incorporated elements of Western cuisine into their dishes. "I got a letter from San Francisco," Pete Martinez commented, helping himself to more stew. "Other territories are interested in our trade routes. Some have even suggested expanding into maritime trade." "The world is changing," Morning Flower declared, her hand resting protectively on her belly. "Our child will be born in a time different from the one we know." Later, alone in their room, Morgan held Morning Flower as they watched the moonlight through the window. Her mother's clock ticked softly on her bedside table, marking the precious moments of her new life. "Sometimes I wonder if I deserve so much happiness," he confessed, "after everything I've done." "True merit lies in recognizing mistakes and working to correct them," she replied, turning to face him. "You didn't just change your own life, Alexander. You helped change the lives of many others." As if to confirm his words, sounds of music and laughter came from the yard, where cowboys and warriors shared stories around the campfire. It was a scene unthinkable a year ago. Two worlds not just coexisting, but mutually enriching each other. "Our son or daughter will have the best of both worlds," Morgan said, his hand joining hers on her belly. "The strength and wisdom of the Nez Perce, along with the opportunities we can provide. And most importantly," Fleur de Manhin added, "you will have the example that love can overcome prejudice, that change is possible when you have the courage to follow your heart." The next morning brought yet another surprise. A delegation from Washington, D.C., sent to study the Morgan model of cooperation with the natives. Morgan and Morning Flower welcomed them together, their joined hands symbolizing the very essence of what they had built. "Some will say it's just a dream," one of the delegates commented skeptically, "that it cannot work on a large scale. All great changes begin as dreams, Morningflower replied serenely. But they are built on hard work, mutual understanding, and respect. As he led visitors around the ranch, Morgan reflected on his journey, from the ruthless cattle baron who took what he wanted by force, to the man who learned that true strength comes from unity and respect. Every step had been difficult, every change hard-won, but the result was there, visible in the smiling faces of the young apprentices, in the shared prosperity of the new trade routes, in the peace that finally reigned in the valley. And mainly, it was in the love that grew every day between him and Fleur de Manhun, a love that had proven to be stronger than any prejudice or adversity. "What do you see when you look into the future?" he asked her that night, as they watched the sunset from the same spot where they had first met. Morningflower smiled, that smile that still made his heart race. "I see hope, Alexander. I see a path that others will follow, an example that our son will carry forward. I see love overcoming fear, unity overcoming division. And I'll see you," Morgan finished, pulling her into his arms. "My Morningflower, who taught me that it's never too late to change, to do the right thing." The sun sank below the horizon, painting the sky with the same colors as that first meeting. But now, the shades of red no longer resembled spilled blood. They were promises of new dawns, of futures built on foundations of understanding and mutual respect. And so, in the lands of Oregon, a new story was beginning to be written. No longer one of conquest and domination, but of unity and hope. A story that proved that even in the most unlikely places, love and courage could change the course of the winds and create new paths for everyone.